We have contact. So I've started recording, and I'm going to introduce myself, and then you can introduce yourself because I think you do better than me. My name is Marci Baun. I am the founder and owner of Wild Child Publishing and Freya's Bower. You can find me at facebook.com/Marci Baun. You can find me at twitter.com/Marci Baun. You can find me at pinterest.com, Marci Baun. You can also find me at marcibaun.com, wildchildpublishing.com. Yes, your eyes are getting big. I am everywhere. And you can also find me at finallypublished.com. So come check me out. And if you need to talk to me, give me a call. My phone number is available. And Patricia.
I'm Patricia Bates. I'm an author. I am the founder, owner, CEO, accountant, and all-around hat wearer for Crimson Frost Books and its imprints Midnight Frost Books and Ice Castle Press, which is launching this spring. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Crimson Frost Books and Midnight Frost Books, as well as on Twitter at twitter.com/frostbooks. We're currently working on getting the Pinterest set up and a couple of other places. So yeah, you can also look us up on our website at www.crimsonfrostpublishing.com.
It sounds like you wear just as many hats as I do.
Yes. I don't think that there is any possibility of wearing more than 6 or 7 hats, in all honesty.
You can try.
Never have enough.
So how long has Crimson Frost been in business?
Crimson Frost Books has been in business. We actually opened our doors for submission in April of 2013. We did our first release in July of 2013, so we've been open for a little over 2 years. We've also during that time we opened Midnight Frost Books, which is the imprint which does all of the non-romance fiction genres. And then we're opening Ice Castle Press in February of 2016, which will be all children's books, middle grade, and young adult books.
So will those children's books also be illustrated, or is there a certain age that you were saying children's, middle grade, and young adult?
Yes.
For Ice Castle?
Yes.
So that's also going to include illustrated, or?
It will include illustrated. We actually currently have six different books right now which are illustrated, and we just signed with a new author who has a series of 9 all about farm animals. So they'll all be illustrated, as well as we've got a few YA titles and a couple of mid-grade books.
So I want to know what possessed you to become a publisher. As a fellow publisher, I can ask this, because was it different than what you thought it was going to be? Did you start out as an author and then you became a publisher, and then so what happened?
Originally, I started in the industry as an author. Then I started editing for other authors, other publishing houses, started doing promotional work for other authors, promotional houses. And it sort of snowballed, and then about 2.5 years ago, actually about December of 2012, I had gotten to sitting down and I thought, I should maybe look at doing, hosting different authors, have a storefront on the web page and on the blog, and, doing that. And then I happened to talk to someone else who happens to be a publisher, and she says, "Sounds like you want control of everything." So it was kind of a natural progression, really. It wasn't just something that I had originally ever thought about starting to do. It was just one of those. At the time that I started working on it, it felt right. It felt like I was ready for that next step. Since then. I have realized the insanity, but I have a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. And I have an amazing group of publishers that I deal with, as well as authors. So I have a lot of fun with it.
And that always helps.
It does. It does, because there's so many new authors out there who the wrong information, and so sometimes you have to put the teacher hat on and say, no, it doesn't quite work this way. But so you do get to be a teacher and an editor and a mentor, and you get to play all the hats.
So what about being on this side, being an actual publisher as opposed to an author, surprised you?
I think the biggest thing that surprised me was that I didn't realize when I was an author, I didn't quite realize exactly what the publisher has to do. As an author, my job was to write the book, do the edits the editor told me, and promote. That's it. That was my job, right? When you're a publisher, you have to maintain communication with the editors, with the authors, with the marketing, with accounting. You've got to make sure your statements are all done, and you've got to make sure everybody's paid and everybody's happy. You have to make sure deadlines are met. There's a different level of responsibility and accountability with being a publisher than being an author. Being an author, comparatively, it's very easy because all you're doing is writing and editing, right? I mean, it's not an easy task. Don't get me wrong here. It's a very difficult one because you're constantly having to learn and grow. But as an author, you are responsible for your own work. As a publisher, you're responsible for everybody's work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. Do you have a favorite genre?
I think everybody grows. There are certain genres that I still love, that I will always love. Historical romances has got to be my top favorite. But I have found that I'm truly enjoying the paranormal romantic thriller genre right now. And by paranormal, I don't mean shapeshifters and vampires and werewolves. I mean the ghosts and the ghouls and the things that go bump in the night that we are sort of familiar with without the lore. And I'm finding I'm having a lot of fun with that particular genre right now.
Are you learning more about the lore of the ghosts and the things that go bump in the night, or?
Oh yes. One thing that because I'm anal about research. I would.
Yay! I'm not alone. I'm a little anal about that too.
Well, I don't want to have, there's so many different aspects of the lore that are associated with ghosts and phantoms and different, things that we may not consciously interpretate, and that a lot of people, they think that they know. And when you start digging around into the lore of all of these things, you get a chance to see where the lore comes from beyond your understanding. There's different lores, right, different places in the world. So when we start doing that digging and start doing that research, all of a sudden you kind of get a broader picture. It opens the doors and it allows that creativity to flow. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to follow all the rules all the time, but it does mean that you can stretch the rules a little bit, Right.
Now, do you still write?
Oh, yes. Yes, I usually try and carve out at least an hour to 2 hours a day just to write. Currently, I have 4 books on the go at the moment that I'm writing.
Wow. So what are those paranormal romance? Are they historical? Are you writing any kids?
I have a paranormal thriller that I'm doing, a LBGT book that I'm editing at the moment. I finished it and I'm editing it. I also have a historical that I've been working on for 3 years. It's a Celtic romance, so it's the research is what's taking so long.
Oh yeah.
And then I have one that I'm working with another author on that is a children's book. Actually, it's all superheroes and stuff, but it's geared for kids. It's a chapter book for ages 10 to 13.
Oh, it sounds like fun. Well, I have an 11-and-a-half-year-old, and she really loves fantasy. And one of the biggest things that I have discovered, and someday when I have time, I'll sit down and start writing. I do write a little bit, but I don't write a lot anymore because of the amount of time that it takes to manage publishing houses, and also family and life, and everything else that entails. But, one of the things I found, at least for my daughters, like I said, she loves fantasy. And what I'm seeing whenever I go out trying to find good fantasy books for someone her age or her reading ability, which is above the average 11-and-a-half-year-old, but certainly, I don't necessarily want her reading young adults, because some of that is just a little bit more, as far as topics go, than I think really would be okay for her to handle. So,
I totally agree. The YA that I've seen, like, it's almost it almost borders not on young adult, but more towards the new adult stuff, which, is it's a little bit too much for a 13-year-old. My son's 13, and there's certain things that I just won't allow him to read, because the content is just, it's too mature, and it doesn't allow them to really be kids when they're reading.
I agree. Well, the other thing is too, is that for her, so she for a long time was reading books that were very, very short, and they were, but she really, I mean, she'd read a 60-page book in like less than an hour. So it was far below what she was able to read. And then she was also reading some that were 100 and 250 pages. But the thing is that once you hit that 250 pages, there's nothing until you hit about 500, 600, 700 pages. So you have this big area where, that's what I was saying. We need books, kids' books, tween books that are between 300 and 400 pages long, and fantasy books with female protagonists. She is so into fantasy, and the vast majority, like, she loves Percy Jackson. Absolutely loves it. And I think it's great because there is at least one of the characters is a strong female character. She's the daughter of Athena. So that's great. Yes. She's a strong female character. But gosh, wouldn't it be great if there was a series that was, had the female being the protagonist, but she has friends that are male and female. I know that sounds silly, but what kind of, it's all about the message that is being given to me. It's about that. She loves books on, like dragons and griffins and everything like that. But again, Percy Jackson, I think the shortest book is 550 pages. And that's great. She'll read it, and it'll take her about a week to read it. And then she moves on to the next. But then the next series that she really likes, which is Wings of Fire, they're only about
my son loves that one.
They're about 250 pages. So it took her a long time before she would start reading something that was longer, because the number of pages scared her. It became, you know what I mean? It's this huge gap. So to me, the big gap that they have right now, first off, are books that are in the 300-400 page, 300 to 500. And then, because I think, like, if you had a kid who was reading 250 pages, if you gave them a book that was 300 pages, they wouldn't feel like, oh my God, suddenly I'm going to drop off the deep end and I'm never going to climb out of this book. right?
Yeah.
And so then, or you give them something that's 350, it doesn't look like War and Peace to them. So, yeah, that's been my biggest thing. And so that's kind of what I was thinking, gosh, maybe my next book should be should be more of it should be a book that's geared towards my daughter. Now, she was reading these books. She was reading Spiderwick at 8.
Yeah.
And we went into some children's bookstore, and apparently that was really early. That was young. An 8-year-old, that was young to be reading Spiderwick. And she devoured those things. But then she was stuck, like I said, in that size of a book because, or 250, because after that it just goes up to the tomes of Harry Potter. And so that's really kind of what or you go into YA, and I just don't think I don't want her dealing with some of those issues. And 11-year-olds really are capable of reading a lot higher than what I think the publishing industry right now gives them credit for.
I agree completely. Currently, Midnight Frost has 2 young authors, and by young authors, I mean these are one is 13 and one is 15.
Wow. So you had their parents sign the contract, right?
Yes.
I hope their parents signed the contract.
Yeah, there was no children's name on those things.
No.
But, that's one of the things that I have found is one of our things is that we promote literacy for these kids. And one of the biggest things that I have found, they're picking out books that are long. They're really good books. They're really, like my son loves the Legend of the Invisible Man, Tom Sawyer, those sorts of books, and those are the longer style books. But, one of the things that I have found is that there are so few publishers that are willing to take the chance on 100,000 or 150,000 or 200,000 word book, because it's too big for them. They want to consistently break it up. And so one of the things that I've found, because I was doing some research to see with the YA, what length we should look at and that sort of thing. And one of the things that I have found consistently across the board is a lot of publishers want 65,000 to 80,000 words, and as you know, those are short books. I mean, I've got one author who submitted a book for 120,000 words, and she's like, I know we're going to have to cut it back, and I know, but I really think that it needs all of those words. Well, maybe instead of looking at the words, we should be looking at the story and making those connections, because the young minds that your daughter is prime example. My son writes. He does children's books. He does illustrated. We're working up towards the children's books, the chapter books. And, it's funny because they don't think they don't think in terms of how many words they look at it as, is it a good story? Can I get lost in the pages? And I think that's what we need to really focus on, is getting kids involved regardless of word count. So I think 500-page book, because that's nothing. If you can get a kid to sit down and read 500 pages, why not?
No,
why
but
not?
I'm just saying that there's that huge leap between 250 to 500. And while they're perfectly capable of doing that, it almost, at least for my daughter, it was a mental block, because it was scary to go, because that's double the size. Go from 250 pages to 500 pages. That's double the size. And so then it becomes kind of a mental block not a mental block. That's not but you know what I'm talking about. That's not the word or the terminology that I really want to use. They're
standing on that bridge looking across that chasm going, oh my God, I can't do it. I can't hang on to the rope bridge, when in reality, they can. It's just, that.
So if you had some books that were in between those sizes, then you can bridge the gap. And once they see, okay, 400 or 350 is not that bad, we can move on. But the other thing to think about is that if you're actually going to print 100,000 or 120,000 or 150,000 page book, unless you're going to have and if you're not going to do print on demand, and you're going to do God, what is it called? Why am I blanking? But you're going to do, say, a print run of 1,000 copies. Then you can afford to do something like that. But when you start getting the higher word counts, it becomes almost prohibitively expensive, and you have to set the prices higher in order to cover your costs. And and then also I think the reason that publishers stop and say, hey, we don't want to do quite that number of words is it's not just the print costs, it's the editing time that's put into it. A lot of people don't realize that, depending on how well the author writes, I mean, it can take me 2 hours to get through 25 pages or for editing, or it can take me 2 hours to do 50 pages. Or I've had books where I got through 10 pages in 2 hours, and you're like, oh my God, I want to pull my hair out. And they don't realize just how much time and energy that you sit down and you put into the books, because you really want that, you want that book to shine. So you take the time to say, this, you need to fix this and this and this and this. And here are some examples, especially if you're working with new authors. It's like, here's an example of how to fix this. Now I want you to go through the entire book and look for these. I've highlighted some of them, and go through and fix them. If you don't understand, please email me, because I'm happy to help. And a lot of times the new authors don't understand, but don't say anything. And either fix it or ignore it, and you're like, wait a minute, okay, we need to back up here, and you need to tell me what it is about this that you don't understand. So,
exactly. And a lot of the time too, sometimes it works the opposite way too, is you get an established author who's got a number of books out, who thinks that they know more than you do, so they're going to argue the point, and that takes time away from, moving the process along, right?
Yes.
And that's just one of those things. I mean, we're all human. At the end of the day, there is no machines involved. I mean, yes, we're using a computer, but what's on the other side of that computer is human. It's flesh and blood, and it's got an opinion, and it's got feelings, and it's got all these, So I think a lot of the time, a lot of readers and a lot of authors don't quite realize the whole process. Now, for me personally, I don't mind having, to maybe eat a couple of dollars when it comes to a print, if I really believe that the book is worth it. We've got a couple of books right now that are going to print that have been selling like unimaginably well, compared, because the authors are new, they don't know, we have one who's established, and her book, she hasn't done anything different, but it's just been, it's just been selling, and it's been selling really, really good for since it came out 2 months ago. So, you have to kind of balance it out. When we're looking at things, because Frost Books Group, which is the whole group of books that we publishing that we do, we do take into consideration word count. That is a big consideration, because the reality is that the longer the work, the more money it is that we have to put out to put the book into market.
Right.
But if we get a book that's 120,000 words that we really believe strongly is going to sell, and we know that the author is going to work their tail off to promote and get out there and really push it, we look at all of the different parts of it. We look at the word count, the story, what the author is willing to do. Is the author willing to listen and willing to be guided along? Is the author need someone to hold their hand and walk them through the process step by step? All of these factor in, right? And at the end of the day, the bottom dollar is, the bottom line is, how much money are we going to make on this book? How much is the author going to make? So you have to play it by ear to a degree, but you can't just say, well, this book is 120,000 words, so I'm not going to look at it. You kind of have to, it's one of those things where it's a hard decision. And sometimes, we've contracted a book that was 107,000 words, and I think we cut out like 20,000 words or so that we could get it tight enough and fast paced enough to put out there. And it's been doing, steady in sales, right? So
I've gotten books where we signed, and it was one book I edited. It was 150,000 words. And when I was done, it was 90,000.
Yes.
It was like there was so much repetition, and there was so much in there that wasn't necessary. And it wasn't because I was heavy on the chopping. It was just like, this doesn't need to be in here. This doesn't need to be in here. Let's pull it out. You read it. You tell me. And a lot of times the author's like, you're absolutely right. This didn't need to be in here. It's an action adventure, and some of the stuff that was in there, if you put it in, you lose some of the suspense and the movement forward.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of I know that a lot of people, and some of it's very popular for people to have, like, when I say multiple POVs, I'm talking like 5, 6, 7, 8 POV points of view, and it just becomes almost too much. It's like people watch so much TV. They watch CSI, these CSI shows. They watch The Walking Dead. They watch all of these different programs that have so many different points of view, and they forget this is a book. This is not a TV show. It's not when you go. It's not like sitting there and watching a show that's actually only 20 minutes long once you take out the commercials. It's only 20 minutes long. So maybe you're going 5 minutes or less between each point of view. Whereas when you're reading a book, you could be going chapter after chapter, and that person may not be reading it, maybe reading it a little bit each day, or maybe going a little bit of time. You know what I'm saying? They only have a certain amount of time to read it. So by the time they get back to that POV, it could be 5 days. Times have changed. I remember in the 80s, there was it was called The Australians. And it had something like, I don't remember how many POVs it had, but I remember reading first, I think, this is a long time ago. So it's like the Americans or the American colony. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but I remember starting and reading that series. And then by the time I got to the Australians and it had something like 10 different POVs, I'm just like, I'm done. I mean, 10 POVs. And I really want to know what's going on with this person. And I'm starting to lose track of who all these people are. And so I think that when people are writing books, especially fiction, they are forgetting that people have less time. There's so many other things that take their time, from social media to taking their kids to soccer practice or basketball practice. To, just even working, that when you write a book, you really want to make sure that you stay focused on where you're going and how it's moving forward. To me personally, I don't really like more than 3 points of view per book. And I prefer one tight POV, especially when you have like a suspense novel or a thriller, because there have been a number of suspense novels or thrillers that I've read where they throw in like the villain, and it's like, oh, well, now I know what's going to happen. So I'm not, there's no more suspense for me. Oh, he's going to do this, or he's thinking this. Oh, well, that's just my personal preference, but I really think that unless the villain is done very, very well, and there's some that have been, it takes away all of the suspense in like a thriller or a novel or even a romantic suspense when you throw that villain in.
It does. That's a huge thing. Point of view is huge. Personally, if I'm reading a book and I have to go back 5 pages to figure out whose point of view I'm in, I lose interest. I've got a few books that I have that are rather dog-eared, that I've read probably 1,000,001 times, by my favorite authors. And one of the biggest things throughout them is there's so few points of view. It's not bouncing from this person to this person to this person, and that's a huge thing. A lot of new authors, a lot of even established authors. I'm guilty of this in my first drafts. I know I am. I'll put in from this point of view and because I'm weaving the story, but the final copy, the final version doesn't necessarily have 15 points of view. It's got 2, maybe 3, because at the end of the day, you want the reader to connect with your main protagonists. You want them to connect with the hero, the heroine. Those are the people that they're connecting to. Those are the ones who need to be memorable. Everybody else is a flash in the pan. And for me, I agree with you. The more points of view that you have, the more likely you are to have to track different characters. And if I need a map or a spreadsheet to keep track of all of the different characters, I don't have time for that. I'm in the process. I'm working with another author right now where we're doing a major series of paranormal romances, and each book has certain characters that have been in all of the books because they have to be. But at the same time, each story is its own standalone. You can read that book and you don't need to read the next one or the one before it to actually understand what's going on, because that's how you need to do it, is you need to write each book as a standalone. You can connect them with a simple thread, but you don't want them to be the same story. And that's another thing that I have found. It was an author who takes a scene out of one book, rewrites it with a different point of view, and sticks it in the next book in the series. It drives me up the wall. Me up the wall. It's like, I've already read that.
Yeah, no. So I also think, there are people who really enjoy series, but most of the time they want the standalone series now, because they want to be able to jump in the middle of a series and automatically get to know these people without having to start on book 1. We have a few of those. We have a suspense thriller series that's written by David Huffstetler, and it follows cases of a Texas Ranger. Yeah, they're very imaginative. They're fast-paced. They're a lot of fun to read. We have another one that is standalone. That's urban fantasy. And it's called the series name is Flames of Perdition, and it's fabulous. I was actually almost thinking that I might want to. I was almost thinking that it might be appropriate for my 11-and-a-half-year-old, because that's how good it is. But then I thought, I don't know. Maybe not, because one scene is in a casino. So, there's some things like that, but it was so, they're fabulous series. But they're standalone. So you're able to jump in, and not that the others aren't good. We have some fabulous series that you really need to read the first before you read the second and the third. Or it helps. It really helps to do it, but it's still, I think people really do like series because they like familiar people, but most of them are more of standalone series now that seem to be, more popular, I would say.
And I agree. Although talking series, one thing that drives me up the wall is when an author shops their series around. We had an author who submitted to us, and we found out later after we had contracted the book that it was book 3 or 4 in the series. And it drives me nuts, because it's like, okay, well, one of the things that the feedback we had gotten was, well, where's the rest of it? There, it seems like there's something missing here, something that, a pre-story. So we asked him, hey, where's the pre-story? Could you do up, maybe do one up for us? And he's like, well, no, I've already, it's already it's already pre-storied. It's part of a series. It's this number book, right? And for us, like, series are great because they establish characters, and you establish the same character over and over and over again in each of these books. But at the same time, you, as an author, you have to realize if you're gonna pitch a series, pitching a series and putting one book with this house and one book with that house and one book with that house, you're not going to get more sales. You're pitching 3 individual books. You're not pitching a series. And that's something that I think authors need to think about before they do, because nothing worse, as a reader as well. If I'm into a series and I have to go look at a different publishing house because the series has, this character's in this book by this publishing house, it kind of makes me go, why?
Well, the other thing is too, is that what a lot of authors don't realize is that that their readers won't always follow them to another house because they won't know that they are at the other house. You know what I'm saying? So just because they've signed with another house, it doesn't mean that they're going to have the same amount of sales at that other house that they do at their current one. So maybe they do well at this one, but they think, well, I could do better at this other one. And it doesn't, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to translate. Now, Steve Campbell asked us you notice on the side, he asked us if we were using the term standalone series to mean a series where each book stands alone. And yes, I answered yes, but I wanted to clarify that for anybody who is watching this later, that yes, definitely, that's how we're using it, because there are a lot of series that they are series because either the protagonist, or sometimes it's not just the protagonist that holds them together. It is also, it could be the location, the town. I know of a lot of series that it's all about the town, and then it's the people in the town. And so each people are, introduced throughout different books, or there are other series that have different, that are held together by some other theme, but they are each book is a standalone book. You don't have to read all of the others. You can, and we hope that you do, but you don't have to read the other books. That's what we're in the business for, to sell books. So yes.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a big thing is and like you said, it doesn't have to be a character. It doesn't have to be a location. It could be anything. It could be an object within that goes from book to book to book. It could be, an action. The series Sierra Lake and I are writing the Forsaken series. It's paranormal, and the one constant throughout is the recovery of all of these mythological beings who have been thrown out of their species, their time frames, their realms, because of the actions of one individual. So it can be an action, it can be a place, it can be any number of things, but at the same time, every book is different, and every book introduces new characters, new situations, new powers. It's all on how the author presents the picture, or presents the words to the reader to get that picture.
Right. Well, I have a book that I finished last year called The Whispering House, and it's urban fantasy. It's got some. It does have some romance. It's got a little bit of erotica in there, although that's not the focus of it. So it's got sex in there, but that's definitely not the focus of it. And there is going to be a second book because it's a series, but it's not necessarily going to be the protagonist or the heroine of this book is not necessarily going to be more than just a character in the next book. You know what I mean? As just someone in the background of the next book, because it's linked. It's linked differently. So it'll be. I don't know. The character hasn't talked to me yet. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens next, even for me.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Well, that's the thing is making sure that the characters are talking to you too, because if the characters aren't talking to you, you know, it makes it harder to write. I actually had that conversation with a non-writer the other day, and I was saying to her that, she had asked me what I was working on, and I told her, and I says, it's kind of on the back burner. And she says, well, why? And I says, because the characters just aren't talking to me right now. She looked at me as though I'd lost my mind. But, you know, that's an author thing. So I think I did about 2 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. We have lots of little voices in our heads. So, I mean, I have a few, there's one story that I've been wanting to write for a long time, but the amount of research that it's going to take because it's historical and it's set back in the time of Eleanor of Aquitaine. And so the amount of research that it's going to take, and it's about a jeweler. And so then it's not only going to take research for historical, but it's also going to take research about jewelry and making jewelry and how they made jewelry back then. And you don't want to do a data dump with all of that information. But at the same time, you need enough of that information so that you have the authenticity of that person actually living in that time period, so that the reader can become immersed. And also the mores of the time, you have to be careful, because one of the things that sometimes drives me nuts is I picked up this book on iTunes, ebook on iTunes, and it was a historical romance, but someone, the person who wrote it, used King Pierre of France.
Okay, well that's
never happened.
I have no words.
You know, it was just like, oh my God.
That would be something. Yeah, that would be something that could be easily resolved by opening a book. Doing a little bit of research, and granted, research isn't all glamorous. I mean, I've got 2 books right now that I'm going through for the Celtic research. They're 10 pounds. I swear to God that they're 10 pounds. You know, they're 4 inches thick, and some of the writing in there is just, I need someone to decipher it so that I can actually understand it, because it is in Gaelic or Celtic. And, you know, I mean, I'm lucky enough that I live in an area where there is a major, an international university. So if I get too stuck, I can always go and ask them. But, you know, that's the thing with historicals for me, is we need to have that, that accuracy. There is nothing worse than opening a historical and you have, you know, the characters talking 20th century English in 16th century Spain.
Well, this was I want to say, it was like the Middle Ages in England, and the girl was riding her horse hell-bent for leather, which is a term that didn't even come about until the mid to late 1800s. So it was kind of hard for me when I was reading this. Okay, not only did she get King Pierre wrong, she got hell-bent for leather, because it was the protagonist, the heroine, who was saying she was riding hell-bent for leather. And I'm like, okay, that didn't even exist. You know, the terminology, it's not like you can't write them with the language that they spoke back then, because we wouldn't understand it. I mean, look at how we struggle to understand Shakespeare. But you
Yeah.
have to have a certain amount of authenticity, and you wouldn't talk about them using a CD-ROM in the Middle Ages. And they
No,
because they wouldn't even know what that is, so
exactly.
you have
But
to, unless you're doing steampunk. So,
yeah, exactly.
but that's a completely different genre.
Exactly. But that's one of the things that I find that some authors they don't realize, and when you say to them, because I do look at other people's work outside of the publishing house, I say to them, this is a good story, but you have two different time frames here. You have two different time periods. You need to focus on one or the other. Do a little bit more research. It needs to be understandable, but at the same time, you don't want to make it sound like you're trying to tell a 17th century story using 21st century dialogue or in terminology, because it doesn't work.
Oh, okay. She said by 5:15. Okay, great. Thanks. I'm sorry. We had.
No, that's all right. My husband brought me coffee.
Obviously, I need to take care of something.
So what what's one of your pet peeves about publishing?
Oh, I think the biggest pet peeve is it's really when someone submits and doesn't read the submission guidelines. So, and then you put them up there, and you actually writing the submission guidelines took a lot longer than a lot of people realize, because you have to make sure that you put everything out there that you are looking for, but also that you don't want. And I have found that even when I put things in bold, in red, and as large as I can possibly make it without it taking up the entire screen, that people frequently still don't read the guidelines. So and I don't think I'm the only one as a publisher who finds that very frustrating. And what that goes to show professionalism, or someone, how much or little they pay attention to detail. And and when you're a publisher and you're looking at this, you're like, okay, if they're not going to read my submission guidelines, what else are they not going to do? How serious are they about being a published author? And I think that's one of my biggest pet peeves. Another one would be how, sometimes authors think they just don't realize how much time each book takes. And so as they're waiting for you to get back to them, they're like, okay, I've turned the book into you yesterday. How come you haven't turned the edit around yet? Yeah, and it's like, well, or I turned it into you and I've responded, yes, I got it. I turned it into you last week. How come you haven't sent me an edit yet? And it's okay. Well, obviously someone's using a pencil sharpener in the background. So, how come you haven't turned it into me? And it's like, well, I have other authors who are sitting in the queue, but not only do I have other authors sitting in the queue, we're working on making sure that there are some books that are releasing, and I need to make sure that goes smoothly. We're setting up all of the marketing and promotion that's going to be going on. And then, or if we're around quarterly reports, I always just send out an email that says, hey, I'm doing quarterly reports. I may not get back to your email within a few days. And if I don't get back to you in a few days, then, realize that I'm busy working on these quarterly reports so that I can pay you in time as per the contract. And I want to send you your money. No. So I just nixed a video.
That's all right.
So,
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing that's one of the things that I found. And or they'll send something to you. It'll say, give me 8 to 12 weeks, and 4 weeks later they're getting a hold of you going, hey, why haven't you responded? Why isn't my offer and my, just let me know if it sucks. No, it doesn't work that way. There's a process, especially with submissions. Yes, the in-house authors get a little bit more of a fast track, because a lot of the time their editor is the first one that reviews it. It's not just, oh, well, I have 3 editors standing by to do reviews on this. Here you go. It goes to them, then it goes to the other 2, right?
Right.
And my editors don't sit at their computer and wait for me to send them stuff. They're authors, they're editors for other houses. They do freelance work. Some of them have day jobs. So, I don't sit there and go, well, I want it like next week. Here's a time frame. Doesn't matter whether it's a review for a submission, whether it's edits, whether it's this or this or this. If it's getting close to deadline and that book is due out in 2 months, you better believe you're going to be getting some emails from me, because deadlines are deadlines and they're there for a reason.
Right.
But, an author needs to understand that, all of the information that they give us is what we're looking at. We're looking at their submission as, underneath the magnifying glass. It's not just, oh, I'm going to read it and send you a yes or a no. It's, okay, I read it, wasn't too keen on it. What about this person? What do they think,
Right.
And we need to know how much work we have to put into it. It's not just a case of, oh, this is a great manuscript, it's going to sell like hotcakes, you're not going to have to do much work.
Well, the interesting thing is that sometimes even when you get books that are fabulous and you think, oh, this is going to sell like hotcakes, and for some reason they don't take. So then you have to step back and say, okay, how are we going to market this so that the sales pick up? What are we missing here? And, and sometimes it's the author. Because a lot of authors come in thinking that they're going to automatically, within that first month, they're going to be shot to bestseller status, and they're going to be able to quit their day job, and they'll be set for life, just like Stephen King. And, we would love that. We want you. We do. We want you so much. But what people don't realize is that it's a long time. A lot of times you have to think in the distance of it. Yeah. It's a long-term process with long-term goals. And, it could be 5 years out before you start seeing decent sales, but you have to keep putting books out there, and you have to keep promoting. And if what you're doing isn't working for you, then you need to step back and say, okay, this is obviously not working. So what can I do next? And that requires research. It's not always necessarily going to be easy, but if you stay focused, someday you might be able to buy yourself a nice dinner.
Yeah. Hey, a nice pair of shoes.
I'm joking, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the one thing that I found in all honesty is that it's not an overnight success. You have, I've been an author. My first book came out in 2007, 2008. It's still doing okay with sales. It's 7 years old, 8 years old.
Right.
But that's the thing is I find that if you don't put stuff out, people forget you, because there are 10,000 other authors out there who are putting stuff out. They're right there. They're in the reader's face. And that's the big thing is you have to understand that you're not going to be an instant instantaneous success. You know, these authors who are big names who, you know, write one book and become world famous and make millions of dollars, they're the exception, not the rule. And if you go into this thinking that you're going to write one book and be the next E.L. James or J.K. Rowling or Stephen King, you need to step back and say, let's refocus here, because that's just going to lead you to disappointment, to to step back and not want to write anymore. There's so many aspects of this industry that if you're not prepared for, they can literally destroy you. I mean, there's negative reviews, there's trolls, there's piracy. I mean, there's all of these other things, and you have to look at the big picture. If all you're focusing on is writing that one book, becoming the next J.K. Rowling, you're not going to get there. You know, it takes hard work. I mean, if you look at, Stephen King, how many years did he go before he published his first book? How many times was he rejected? Yeah. You know, J.K. Rowling, how many times was she rejected before she landed her big deal with Harry Potter? You have to look beyond the surface.
Her 50 Shades of Grey she self-published it first. And it wasn't until she really started doing well, and when I say well, when she started hitting it big, that one of the big New York publishers gave her a contract. But she was at it for a few years at the very least. I don't know exactly. I don't know exactly how long it was, but I know that she was a self-publisher before she got signed with one of the big six. And the only reason they signed her was because of the number of sales that she did. So, and that's what a lot of people, I guess a lot of times, long gone are the days of authors being able to be hermits. You have to be willing to go out and socialize. And when I say socialize, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to go out and go to parties and socialize that way. But you have to be willing to socialize and spend a certain amount of time socializing on Facebook or Twitter or Pinterest or one of these places that works for you. You have to be willing to socialize, and beyond just saying, buy my book. You can't just say, buy my book.
Yeah. No. The worst thing, I friended someone on Facebook, and then I probably unfriended them because the minute I friended them, I got a message from that inboxed me with a direct link saying, please buy my book. It's a wonderful story and blah, 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 blah. They hadn't posted to my wall there. There was no discussion about, mutual interests or anything along those lines. It was simply, I need numbers for friends on Facebook, and I'm going to hit everybody up as a friend, and then I'll hit them up to buy my book. That's spamming people, and that is so.
And people don't like it. I was talking to someone, and they said, well, if I post things on my personal page for people to like, I mention my book and say, or buy my book or whatever, I'm worried that they're going to consider that as spam. And I said, it depends on how often you do it. And it depends on how much you interact with people and how much you are on there just doing personal stuff. So I will post, I actually post quite a bit, but it's not always about my books. It's frequently about my author's books. And I'll say, hey, they're going to be here book signing, or at a book signing here, or here's a fabulous book, buy. But then I also post a lot of other things that are just personal. And I respond to people's posts, and I probably spend too much time there. But and that's one of the problems with social media, is it can be a time suck. But if you schedule your time, I know an author who she does very, very well, and she actually started with us, and then she got signed by a big New York company house because she was selling. She was selling a lot. And so they signed her a six figure deal or so, something like that, a big deal. And she still, even though she has several books out, she still to this day will she interacts with her followers on Facebook. And she posts personal stuff, but she also posts stuff about what her books and the books that are coming out. But it really is a lot of that social interaction, as well as, like I said, she has new books coming out frequently, probably every 3, 4, 5 months now. And but she's personable, and people feel like they know her. It's not just about them buying her book. But you want to be sure that not only do you make it personal, but that you let people know, hey, I'm an author, and you can buy my stuff here. But you don't say buy it or I'm going to unfriend you, or you don't send a message to them as soon as you become friends with them. Hey, buy my book. I've never interacted with you, but here.
Yeah, you can mind my pocketbook, And that's the other thing too, is what gets me is, and I've been seeing a lot more of this on Facebook and Twitter and on blogs and so on and so forth, is authors reacting negatively to reviews, to things. I mean, look at what happened in Europe. That guy that tracked down that 17-year-old and bashed her in the head with a bottle because she said his book sucked.
And you have to remember everybody has an opinion, and you're not always going to like their opinion. And you have to, the best course of action to take with a negative review, unless it is really, unless it is really so far off the mark and they're saying stuff that is completely off the book, is just to ignore it. Because, usually these negative reviews, like I have one, I wouldn't say it's particularly negative. It was a 3-star review, but this guy read my short novella Hieroglyphs, which is only about 15,000 words. And we were talking about research, and I'm getting off the subject here, but we were talking about research for that 15,000 word novella that has an archaeologist, an ancient Egyptian archaeologist in it. I don't know how many hours I spent doing research and making sure that I had the information in there properly. And, so that if someone were to read it, because my experience is there's always going to be at least one expert who reads your book. And if it isn't close or good or full of the information, that they're going to can you. And as it turned out, I was right. Someone read my book they minored in ancient Egypt studies in college, and they read my book and said, it was fabulously researched. It's obviously this person did their research, and, she worked it seamlessly into the storyline without feeling like you were having a data dump. And that really is a challenge. Anyway, but the review, this guy posted a review that was like a 3-star, and that's fine. You get 3 stars. But when I read his review, it's like, okay, he comes from a different culture, and he doesn't know his history of this culture. Because if he did, he wouldn't have written this review. But that's okay. Everybody has their own opinion. And if my book did not work for him, it'll work for somebody else. There's other people who love my book. So, by the way, that one was written, I used a pseudonym, Kit Wilde. And Kit Wilde. So, this is Hieroglyphs by Kit Wilde. You can find it on Amazon and iTunes and Wild Child. Omnilit. It's not really a romance. It's just it's a paranormal. It's a paranormal. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, is I've got one author, right? She emailed me and she was kind of upset because she'd gotten her book is selling really well, and she had gotten several 1 and 2 star reviews, and the one, it was quite bad. It was basically that she, it was a blow to her. It was a blow to the publishing house. It was basically they shredded the book.
Right.
Shredded it. I mean, there was problems with the editing and the formatting and this and that and blah blah. The story, the author didn't do her research. The author didn't know what she's talking about. The author is she does historical reenactments in that time frame. So I think she has to do a bit of research there.
Yeah.
And I just told her, I says, the thing is with reviews, you gotta just ignore them, because the minute you get upset about them, then it affects how you do with other things. I said to her, they're like anything. They're like eyes. Everybody's got them. Just
right.
Ignore is the best option.
Right.
Because I've got one book out. It was actually the first male book that I had ever written. It's full length. It's called I can't remember what it's called. Real Good Man, and it's published through Liquid Silver. And I really had a blast writing it. I mean, yes, I did have to do some research. I'm not a man. Don't have any clue about any of that. So I had to research. There's nothing worse than doing research when you're asking questions.
Embarrassing questions?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And very embarrassing questions. And I got a post on Goodreads, I believe it was, that basically said that as a woman, I should not write those kind of books because I didn't know what I was talking about, that I didn't, I dramatized everything. And it was basically, the book was like a soap opera.
Oh.
The first month that it was out, I had almost 400 books sold.
Wow. Well,
so obviously
something was right.
Yes, exactly. So it's a review in one ear and out the other. I don't pay any attention to them anymore. I don't hunt for them. I focus on my own personal enjoyment. If I'm writing, I write for me first. Well,
I think that if you have a good review, you can certainly use it for promotion. And, and sometimes you can do the same thing with a bad review, is you can use it for promotion. As Hollywood says, there's no such thing as bad press. That's not necessarily always true, but usually, I mean, look at these. You have a lot of stars who behave badly. And sometimes I think they're just behaving badly because they've fallen out of the spotlight and they're trying to bring themselves back into the spotlight. Kind of like a child throwing a temper tantrum because they want your attention, and it may not be the attention that they want, but they are getting some form of attention. So I think that I don't think it hurts to read the reviews, but you also have to do it detached. And that's the hardest thing when you're an author, is to stay detached about your own work. I just got an edit back from, I have a book that I signed, a very short book. It's not even 15K, that I signed with Decadent Press. And it's one of their one night stand standalone series. And she just, Kate, one of the owners, Kate Richards, just sent the edit back to me. And I thought, well, this is going to be interesting because I've never actually written for anybody else. I don't write. I only have maybe 2 books out, because I have spent the last 10 years or so doing everybody else's books. And so it's going to be interesting what she tells me and how I react, not being the editor and and I'm not the publisher, because this is a different publishing house. So I have to be okay with them telling me, well, this is how we do our books. This is how we do the formatting. I mean, a lot of publishing houses do similar formatting, but not every publishing house has a matter of fact, a lot of publishing houses have different editing requirements. And so,
Yes.
as a matter of fact, I think every single publishing house has their own in-house editing requirement that they use. And I think that a lot of authors don't realize that. Well, I was with this publisher, and they use Chicago manual style. And so I'm going to assume that that everybody uses Chicago manual style, and that's not necessarily true.
No.
And then they also have different things that they look for and focus on. So
yes.
Some allow more leeway than others, and some are very particular. There was a time there when it seemed like the favorite word was as. And I remember reading, someone would submit something, and it's like, okay, this is a great story, but you've just used as 20 times on the same page. And this is, so it gets old, and people don't realize, and at one point, I even wrote an article of how to break your as addiction. because there were so many, and I set a rule. I said, if you have, I don't want to see more than 2 as instances on the same page, because people had fallen in love with this linking, with this conjunction, and it's like, no, I don't want to see this that many times. So then they started switching it out with while. I'm like, no. That's not any better. The thing is that the more, I think I say everything in moderation. So if, there are times when using was is fine. There are times when using as is fine. There's times when using when or before or while is fine. But if you use it all the time, then there becomes too much repetition within the prose, and that's, and by mixing it up and finding other ways, it actually makes you a better writer. And sometimes authors don't want to hear that, because it is challenging, and it's also, these books are our babies. And we're bearing our soul to the world with these books, regardless of whether they're fiction or autobiographical or whatever they are. So it's very, it's hard, but if you can step back and say, okay, this person, my editor really has my best interest at heart, then you'll do much better as an author, because you'll be able to, you'll grow, and you'll have a better product in the end. That's the same thing that happened with, I can't wait to see what Kate has to tell me, or maybe I can. No, maybe I can wait. Maybe I'm just going to put it off for a little bit. However, we have a release date of January 1st. So it's not very long, but and it may not take me that long to get through, but, I need to make sure that I do it before the onslaught of Christmas hits me. And suddenly I realize I have 2 days to have it done. So it's, and the title of it, well, this will tell you what it's about. It's titled Mr. Hotness.
I love the title. The title. It's a little bit of a romantic comedy. So I do enjoy having comedy.
You gotta have fun with it.
Yes,
you gotta have fun with it.
Yeah, you do. So.
Well, it is.
Otherwise,
yeah, you're right. And the same thing goes with publishing. I mean, there are days when it's harder to continue than others, especially if something happens that really upsets me. If I have an author, you've bent over backwards to help them, and suddenly they're attacking you, and you've done everything you can to help them, and you're just like, okay, I'm done. We're like every other human, that we have good days and we have bad days. And whenever I have a knee-jerk reaction and I want to lambast somebody, I step back and I might wait a day or two before I respond to an email, so that I don't Rip them a new one?
Yeah, that's not very good.
No, it's not very professional.
Fun, but not good.
No, yes. You might write it and never send it.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to write
Yeah,
this.
you do that a lot.
Get it out of
You
my
do
system.
that in this a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
You do it a lot, but then you don't send it, or you're on the phone and you're just about ready to hit that text message send button, and then you go, nope. I'm going to be mature. I'm going to be mature, not going to be professional. But yeah, no, I it's an industry that I really love. It's one that I think there's a lot going on in, and people just, they need to be aware of the ins and outs. And if you're going to get into it, the best advice I can give is do your research, do your homework, and
know your market.
Know your market.
Know who your market is and who you're marketing, who you want to focus on promoting to. And because that's really essential if you want to sell books.
Yes.
And what a lot of people don't realize, that regardless of who you're published with, whether you're self-published or you're published with like a big New York publisher, the average book sells less than 100 copies in its entire lifetime.
Yes.
And that's so,
that is very true.
That's why it's so hard to get signed, because publishers, we're in it to make money. Yes, we love books. Yes, we want to, we want to continue to get people to read books, and we want to get good books out there. But at the same time, we also have to make money in order to, in order to stay in business.
That's very true. And that's the one aspect about it that a lot of people, I don't think, realize. Every publisher that I have talked to as an author and as a publisher have all told me the same thing. It's never been the first year. You're not making $1 million within the first year. It takes time to build the reputation and build the readers' following, because you're not promoting one book. You're promoting your entire library, your entire stable of authors. And if you've got 72 authors, that's 72 different books, 72 different, identities that you are promoting. It's not an easy task. Yeah. And I think it's something that, that readers and writers, authors should know, because the reality is it's an expensive venture. But it's worth it in the end. In my opinion, it is. It's something that you can't duplicate it. You can't, for me, writing is part of me. I will never not write, because I can't. My brain just doesn't like to shut down and not come up with new ideas. I have a spreadsheet that's 14 pages long of story ideas. So, but that's just me. It's part of us. It's part of who we are as authors, as creative people. And sometimes you just kind of sort of have to just go with the flow and just, but you can't bury your head in the sand and say, oh, well, someone else will do it for me. Because the reality is whether you're a publisher, whether you're an author, you still have to get out there and connect with other people.
And the other thing is that I have found that the authors who do the best, who sell the most, are the ones who go out and connect. They don't just rely on me as the publisher to do it for them. So, because it's that personal touch. Everybody, maybe it's because all of us are now stuck in our houses. We go to work, we come home, we don't have the same community that we used to have in years past. So people want to connect and feel like they know the person, know the writer or the author of the book that they're reading. Whether they really know them that well or not, they still want to feel like they are a part of their lives. And the only way that can happen is if the author makes the effort to go out and promote and socialize on social media, or do book signings, or do book fairs, or really get out there. It is time consuming. You have to set a certain amount of time aside, whether it's every day or weekly, to make sure that you're out there promoting yourself and your books. You just have to.
That's true. Yep. You cannot let someone else do it for you. You can't have that expectation, because the reality is that the reader wants to connect with the author, and the only one who can do that is the author themselves. Having a PR person or, all that's great to set things up for you, but the actual connection is between the reader and the author. And that's the beauty of social media, Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, and authors,
Instagram.
Don't be scared to promote another author. That's one of the things that I've found is that a lot of my authors are doing very well because they promote each other. They've created this interlocking network that, when one has an event, they invite everybody else, and everybody comes and draws in their readers, and, it exposes the readers to different authors, different books, different styles, different voices. And it works. And
as a result, you have other people who then find your books as well.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very true. Very, very true.
Well, it is 5:27. I know you told me that you needed to leave at 5. This is an addictive form of media. And I know that we're certainly going to be doing this again, probably after the first of the year. If you're interested, I would love to have you come back on. Hopefully we can get Jim to come. I don't know what happened with Jim. Because I was even emailing him earlier today. So maybe it was just a technical glitch, kind of like what you had.
Yeah. I found that with Chrome, it just wouldn't open. Like I had the box, but there was no audio or visual. So Firefox, it worked perfectly. I got Firefox installed, it opened and clicked in, and it worked perfectly. So, well, thank you so very much for having me, and I would be delighted to come back again. Because it's very addictive, and it's an industry I'm so passionate about, right? So I would be delighted to come back. Thank you so very much.
And where can they find you?
They can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Crimson Frost Books. Twitter at twitter.com/frostbooks. They can find us online at www.crimsonfrostpublishing.com, www.midnightfrostpublishing.com. We will be opening the storefront for Ice Castle Press in January. We'll be launching that, so please keep an eye out. And that'll be www.icecastlepress.com. We're going to be doing some very cool things. We have some items that are book related, but they are not books. They're designed for the kids. And we've got, like I said, we're setting up our Pinterest. So we will be available on Pinterest very soon. And we are also going to be doing a weekly blog talk radio program. We started it earlier this year, but time frame life got in the way. So we're going to be relaunching that in the new year. And so we will, we'll be talking the industry and talking to authors and editors and publishers, and it'll be fun.
Sounds great. And I am Marci Baun, and you can find me at marcibaun.com. You can also find me on Facebook, facebook.com/Marci Baun, or Wild Child Publishing. I'm at wildchildpublishing.com, freyasbauer.com, and twitter.com/Marci Baun or Wild Child Editor. And I'm at Pinterest. under Marci Baun, as well as Wild Child Publishing. So I hope you've enjoyed us, and you certainly are going to be able to see this again because it will still be up on Blab, but I'm also going to be downloading it and posting it to my YouTube channel. So it's going to be available for people to watch. So I will send you the link when it gets up there, Patricia, and you can forward that link if people are interested in coming to see us chat for, how long was it? An hour and a half or so?
Yeah. Yeah, just a couple minutes longer than we anticipated.
we went this way and that way, and we did end up talking about publishing and different things. So I hope everybody enjoyed it, and hopefully you will subscribe to my channel. And thanks again. And I'll see you next week with Tanya Hoffman. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.